Hi, I'm Daniel Vitalis. I'm just a person like you. I've been really lucky to get to share information with people, but I'm not sharing anything that wasn't already born inside of me and isn't already within you as well. I mean, you contain all the same information. You have access to thousands and thousands and thousands of generations of genetic memory. You don't need a guru, and you don't need 1,000 books, and you don't need a degree, and you don't need to watch 800 YouTube videos to learn any of this stuff. You can just observe it happening around you all the time. You are a genius. It's inherent within you. It's helpful to get feedback from people. It's helpful to hear what other people have to say, but ultimately it resides within you. You can rewild yourself. You can find this in yourself. And you don't need anyone to guide you there, to do it for you, to hold your hand. If you want that, great. I mean, that's great for us. But ultimately, you can be a sovereign. You can decide for yourself, and all the powers always resided within you.
That was epic, man. Thank you so much. That was awesome.
I know that I'm like the antichrist of the raw vegan community somehow. And I sort of enjoy that role because I get to bring fresh information that challenges people. I really think if information's not challenging us, then we're in a kind of a cult, right? That's what cults are all about, is you only present information that works for everybody, right? So everybody can stay this little tightly knitted community, and they don't allow information from the outside to come in and challenge their paradigm. Something that probably a lot of people don't realize is that I was in a similar place. This was way before there was an 80-10-10 diet. But the first raw food teacher I met was Doug Graham, and I was probably about 15 or 16 years old. And he told me that I was doing fruitarianism too extreme. He was like, "You'll fail, you're too extreme about this." Which is interesting, because I think of him as really occupying that sort of one extreme end of that dietary spectrum. So I come out of that world. So it's been really amusing for me to watch the development of that community over the course of years, to watch who the players are in that world, to watch Doug's position in that whole thing, and then to see the impact and or the sort of response that I've got from that community, because a lot of those people don't realize that I did the diet they're doing longer than a lot of them have been doing it. So a lot of them are not well, and that's kind of classic in anything, but they're not speaking from tons of experience usually. Most of the real vehemently zealous characters in that community are pretty new at it. And that's, like anything, when we're really new at something, we tend to be a little bit overzealous about it. For me, I mean, this whole game of being public figures, whatever, I mean, it doesn't matter to me what they think of me personally, but I would ask them to consider the fundamental paradigm from which they're operating. Because most of the people in the fruitarian community start with this really amazing premise. They start with the idea of, hey, there's got to be a natural diet for our species, Homo sapiens sapien. What is it we're supposed to be eating? And they arrive at this conclusion, we should be eating fruits, and there's a reason they arrive at that. It seems very logical. But I would ask those people to consider what we've learned in the science of anthropology about our origins, where we come from, and to consider what human beings living in the natural wild environment are actually like, rather than what we think they might be like. Because we actually know, because there's still some wild peoples living on the planet, and we have a lot of historical data, so we can actually look at what natural diets for human beings are about. And the other thing I would present is for those people in that community to start considering what domestication is versus what wild is. Because that's a really important part of the discussion. And the reason is that most of the fruits that the fruitarian people consider to be natural foods are really recent inventions. And so if you didn't know that, it could lead you to think that the fruits that you saw at the supermarket were natural foods. Unfortunately, they're not natural foods. They're domesticated forms. They're very recently introduced into our caged human diet. So if you didn't know that, you could arrive at this almost biblical perspective on where we come from and think that, well, we came from some kind of Garden of Eden and we just picked fruits all the time. But the reality is, Homo sapiens have lived all over the planet. They've always been hunter-gatherers, so we don't have any evidence anywhere in the world of any raw food fruitarian peoples that have ever lived anywhere. However, that community is really sure that that's how we're supposed to live. And I would ask them to get some evidence for that, and not the kind of evidence that's like, well, I heard so-and-so say this, all that kind of hearsay stuff, but actually look at some evidence, because there's a lot of evidence in anthropology. You know, obviously we've been interacting with hunter-gatherer peoples all over the world for a long time and looking at their diets for some time now. So we do know what we used to eat. We know where we come from, and the fruitarian people have just kind of been making stuff up, which is fine, except that they tend to aggressively attack other people with their view, which I think is unfortunate. So for me, if you want to do a dietary experiment on yourself, cool, whatever. But don't attack people over it. That's kind of crazy.
Speaking of meat, what do you think about meat?
Meat's been in our diet since before our species was born into existence. So prior to the existence of Homo sapien, Homo erectus was consuming meat. And prior to Homo erectus, the Homo habilis were consuming meat. And now we know that even Australopithecus 3.4 million years ago was using stone tools to break into bones to consume bone marrow, and was cutting breaking rock flakes in order to carve up meat. So we know that we've been doing that since before we were even a species. The first Homo sapiens that existed ate meat. We've always eaten meat. And I think it's really interesting that our closest relative, the chimpanzee, also hunts and eats meat. People who are anti-milk should go challenge one of the Maasai warriors to a jumping match. The Maasai drink milk. They are an incredibly robust, powerful African people. Go tell them that milk drinking is unnatural and see what kind of response you get from them. They hunt lions. That's end of story. Some people have mutations that allow them to drink milk into adulthood, and some people don't. If you come from the kind of ancestry where milk drinking is in your background, then you will have a mutation that makes you lactose persistent, which means you can still digest milk as an adult. Other people, Asian people, are notorious for being lactose intolerant, which is actually more natural. They're a less mutated form of human. For them, milk's a terrible idea, worst idea. Why do that? It's inflammatory. It's bad for them. But if you're lactose persistent, it's a great idea, works for you. Again, we can't cookie cut this, but I'll tell you what,
if you want to get the full 50-minute story from Daniel Vitalis on milk, meat, coffee, tea, caffeine, LSD, ayahuasca, marijuana, alcohol, beer, body odor, candida, acne, mushrooms, and the fungi world, Doug Graham versus Gabriel Cousins versus all gurus, if the human race is rotting or composting, his most valuable message to the world, raw foods, the raw community, and why he stayed away from raw foodism, what a typical meal looks like for him, why he doesn't have a six-pack, and why he doesn't necessarily think it's a sign of health, start thriving via rewilding ourselves, eating right for your body type, fruitarianism versus paleo diets, and his most valuable message to the world.
We can't edit all this footage, so we put all our awesome raw footage in one section on our website. Just click on the link below the video in the description and click the Gain Access Now button so you can get all our exclusive RawBrahs videos. For less than the cost of a movie ticket, this super simple option that lets you in our very special video area, updated every time something fresh is in, our full-length videos with experts, a fun inside look at RawBrahs living, and retreats, and more.
And now for a few more teasers, so make sure you tune in.
Foods that alter our state of consciousness or our metabolism are sacred foods. We're so blessed to have them. A world without caffeine, I'm not even that interested in that world. And our culture without caffeine relies on it. So
Get full video at RawBrahs.com.
here's one of the biggest mistakes made in the whole nutrition world. I mean, this is the most glaringly obvious mistake, in my opinion, is the idea that they're...
Full answer by clicking link below.
But my meals look a lot like what you'd get if you...
You know what to do by now.
Now, I would just like to touch on like aesthetics. So we see a lot of times online about you getting crap for how you're like overweight and chubby, and how like everyone, like typically people want a six-pack ripped abs, and they think that's like the sign of health. What do you think about that?
So that's been my experience over the years. Even in gyms, I noticed that. All right, look at this guy.